Welcome back to the It's Not So Late show, and today we are joined by Mark Gibson, who is an award-winning magician who's been featured in the Magic Castle, and you've probably also seen him on Jimmy Falon. Mark, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for being here.
Question for you has got to be, how did you get into magic? Was there someone or something that inspired you to do this?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. So I started magic when I was probably 10 years old. It all began, my cousin Michael did magic kind of as a hobby. We went to go visit him. He lives up near San Francisco. And he showed me how to make a coin disappear. It's a very simple sleight of hand little technique. And that just sparked something in me. And from that day forward, it was just all magic all the time. So that's what started my journey in magic. When I was 13, I found my way to the Magic Castle in Hollywood. By auditioned, by the grace of God, was accepted, and have now been a headliner there for 13 years. So half my life has been spent in that one particular place, but I've performed all over the place for a lot of different people. And yeah, it's just been a great addition to my life.
That's awesome. So in case people don't know, can you talk about the Magic Castle? What is it? I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, but I don't know if everyone understands what it is.
Sure. So the Magic Castle, I describe it as Top Gun for magicians. It's very much the mecca of North American magic. It's considered the greatest showroom or place to perform magic in the world. Thankfully the castle is, well, when obviously it hasn't been open because of the pandemic, but when the castle was operating, we would have performers from all over the world come and fly in and be a part of the shows every single week, no matter when you went. It's an exclusive club, so you have to be over the age of 21 and invited by a member to even gain access to this place. So it's very high end. There's, I think, 5 different bars throughout the place. It's a 200-year-old mansion in the middle of Hollywood. So it's a block up from Hollywood Boulevard, but the best I can describe it is if like The Great Gatsby met the Haunted Mansion.
Ooh.
That's kind of the vibe you're getting here. And it's all the greatest magic across the world. So it's been my home, very fortunately, for half of my life now, and I love it to pieces. So been there ever since.
So I gotta ask you a question. So the first time, you get admitted, what's that like? You walk through the doors for the first time, like go through that experience. What's that like? Were you nervous? Were you anxious? Were you just in a state of shock that you made it? That's like, you did it.
It was a perpetual moment of disbelief, I could say. And even throughout the many years I've been there, and so many times I go, I can't really believe that this is happening. It was very awe-inspiring, to even just to go and to be there. So I started when I was 13, which you need to be 21 to even go to the castle, let alone perform there. But there's a special program within the castle. They call it the Junior Society. It's an elite group of young people who have met the merit and ability to perform at the Magic Castle. So they kind of make special dispensation for the few of us that can go do that. So I was 13, I was the youngest, and I kind of grew up in this place. So my audition was terrifying. That was just mind-numbing, to say the least, just to go out and start performing in this place that my heroes performed in this place and still do. Their pictures and portraits are all over the walls, and it was remarkably intimidating.
Right.
But once you were accepted and you're now a professional entertainer here, and you can kind of book the castle books you for weeks at a time. So you are dedicated to a singular room, and you do 3 shows a night, 7 days a week. So you just run the whole time. So once you do that for the first time, first few shows are intimidating, but once you hit a rhythm, it feels like home.
That's cool. So this audition process, what was that like? Because, magic's one of those things that it's different for every person, right? It's not like music, where you can miss a note, maybe you miss a trick or something, but how does that work? How do you audition? What's the determining factors for who gets in and who doesn't?
That's a great question. So for the castle specifically, it's a little different depending upon if you're like an adult performer coming to audition or if you're a junior. The junior audition is much more rigorous because they kind of make this, if we're going to give you special dispensation to be here, you gotta bring it. It's another thing if you're 30 years old, 40 years old, audition, okay, like you can still even just come into the club. So not that we're diminishing the type of magic or the skill level, you still have to meet a very high bar. But when you're very young, you very much have to meet the merit of those who have been doing this for as long as you've been alive. So it's a kind of a bigger leap to do that. In terms of really what they're looking for, and thankfully the gentleman who I auditioned for, the panel of the junior program, Diana Zimmerman and Bob Dorian, who was the chairman, he unfortunately passed away recently. He was a gentleman I auditioned for in a room full of people. So they put you in what's called the parlor, it's one of the rooms of the castle, and they just have, I think there was probably 50 people auditioning with me that day. So I was just one in a vast sea of other magicians of varying skill levels and experience, and they just kind of one after the other, just kind of go for it. In what they're looking for in the auditions, typically it's stage presence, obviously advanced elements of sleights or ability and skill level. So obviously I'm not going to come out there and go, look, I'm taking my finger off, because your grandpa does that when you're 5. So,
Right.
So there does need to be some metric of, okay, as a magician, I understand what's happening, and that does take a great deal of skill to do or perform, but also can you perform? Can you actually be entertaining in doing this? So there's a lot of metrics to it.
Do they take into account things like originality? For example, if you make up your own routine, like you're making the own trick, because some people, there are some magicians who are creators, and there's some who, who like have creators working for them. So do they also take that into account, the creators versus those who may be, remaking a trick or using a different technique?
Sure, absolutely. So any kind of ingenuity or anything that you can bring to the table, they definitely take that into account. I actually talked with Bob after my audition and the years that I knew him after a great deal, and he would still come and see my shows. Anytime, once I became an adult performer, when I turned 21 and continued on in the castle, he would still come and see my shows, just randomly sit in the back, and he'd give me notes and he'd help me out with it. So you never stop learning. But the number one thing I think they're looking for is possibility and potential.
Okay.
So if you have a desire and a clear, like obviously my audition when I'm 13 is very different than what I'm doing now. But even then, I think what they saw was there's potential. There's possibility here. This isn't someone who went down to the magic shop, spent $50, learned some simple tricks, and is now just giving it a shot. They clearly had time and dedication and a willingness to learn. So I think that's the number one thing that they're looking for, is potential and the possibility of continuing on in this art form.
Right. So in talking about learning art form, I believe you're a mentalist, right? Is that what you've branded yourself as? Correct. I want to be accurate. So mentalist. What's been the most difficult type of tricks, or the most difficult aspects to learn and master? Are there certain things that have been a challenge for you over these years? Where you're like, oh gosh, you're like, that goal is just to like master this.
Yes. So I think one of the things is relinquishing I went in with the same mentality of like, oh, I have to master this thing, or I have to really achieve a level of expertise in it, which is always a great goal. But I think magic is very much like golfing. No one will ever master it. No one's ever got it. I hole in one every single time. Like there's really no formula to it. The best you can strive for is to be engaging and entertaining as consistently as you possibly can. And the medium you do that through is magic. So when you get into like technicality and like sleights, for example, magic kind of goes in the opposite direction, in the sense of the better you do something, it looks like nothing's happening. Magic is one of the very rare art forms that the process is intended to be hidden. Right. I could watch a musician or a guitarist, for example, and just playing a beautiful piece of music, but I can see how incredibly dexterous and wow, and I can see the process happening in front of me. With a magician, the opposite is true. In many ways, the better you are, it's meant to look like nothing's happening. Right. So you may spend 40 hours collectively on one simple move. Wow. That people may never see and aren't intended to see. Right. So it's a tricky metric to find. With other magicians, obviously, the ideal is to make it look like nothing's happening. Right. So if you can get your act down to the point, the best compliment I ever received was a fellow magician came to me after a show and said, "I love your act because there's no moves." Wow. Nothing happened. Like the point A to B, the streamline to that seemed like it just occurred. There didn't seem to be, oh, well, it probably happened when you did that fancy shuffle, or it probably happened when you put your hand in your pocket and then did this weird motion because it shot up your sleeve, or it just looked like it just occurred, which is the ideal situation. Audiences leaving going, it just happened.
Now you perform, I know you perform for everyday people, performing for magicians. Is it more difficult when you're performing for magicians, knowing that they're trying to like dissect every last thing you're doing, or they're looking for the moves? Does that add a level of like, oh, I need to like I need to use misdirection, or I need to make sure they're not on to me?
It's very much a different, it's kind of a different beast entirely. One of the best analogies that I've heard that I apply to magic is good chess players can think up to 20 moves ahead,
Ooh,
but the best chess players think only one move ahead, but it's always the right move.
right.
So doing magic is very much the same way. If I'm approaching to people who likely have never seen a magician before in their life, that the effects that I do for them are going to be very different than what I do for magicians. So sometimes when I perform for magicians, for example, I do what's called mentalism, which is kind of psychological magic.
Mhm.
I will kind of leave breadcrumbs going down a particular known method as to how something's done. So say, for example, if I have someone pick a card and then I read their minds and I tell them what card they picked. Say the method for that would be you just have a deck of all the same cards. That's one way to do it.
Yep.
But I know magicians know that method. So
Mhm.
when I do it, I'm going to use a normal deck, but maybe do some sleight of hand to ascertain what the card is or some psychological trickery.
Wow.
So the trick then becomes, hey, pick a card, think about it, and everyone's going to go, oh, okay, they're all the seven of spades. But when I go, it's the queen of hearts, and then spread out the deck and they're all different,
Oh, wow.
wait, so I'm tricking magician thinking. To whereas if you've never seen magic before, it just looks exactly like it normally would. So
Right.
it's a different kind of thinking that you kind of need to go across. I don't perform for magicians that often. I mean, I'm very open in the magic community of like I will talk about my act or I'll market my tricks. So I'll sell them to other magicians if they want to learn them. I'll lecture from time to time. And that's always a great deal of fun. But
Right.
magician thinking and non-magician thinking are kind of two very different beasts.
I think people don't realize that that goes on too, right? People think that, magicians, for example, like even like you or like the A-list, like the world renowned, like, like the David Copperfield, they think they just go up, do a show, go home. No, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. They're making these tricks. They are lecturing, So what is your favorite part of magic other than the actual delivery of the performance? Since there is so much that you do.
There is a lot. There is a lot. I would say, and the reason I've gravitated to mentalism is I'm deeply interested in the psychology that goes on behind
Mhm.
magic. And there's so many things to take something that is inherently simple and render it astonishing, and how you get there. A great example is for many, many years, I was a restaurant magician, meaning there was when I was in college, there was a small mom and pop shop called Mama D's, they outdoor Italian spot. And people would wait for a long time and they'd bring them beer and bread and everything. And my job was to perform for people as they waited for tables,
Mhm.
just to mainly keep them there and keep them entertained and keep them happy. And over the 4 something years that I did that, you started to see the words that you would use or how you guided people to do things
Really?
in order to create an effect. Obviously, never what occurred to people, but when I would talk to magicians about it, it was very interesting. I would do magic like for children, for example. There's something called sponge balls.
Okay.
Very, very easy
Oh yeah.
tricks. Exactly. They're little colorful balls and you can put them in
Yep.
your hand and vanish. For kids, they're great because they're tactile. They're not cards. I don't have to know what they are. It's just the thing goes in here and now it's gone, or it appears in my hand or something like that.
Right.
One of the most challenging things that you can do is give a child that young instructions. So, for example, hey, buddy, hold out your hand, put the ball in your hand, now close it.
Mhm.
That sounds easy, but it's very tricky because you're a stranger. I don't know who you are. I might be intimidated by this. I'm just having fun. You're 4 years old. You're just kind of wandering about. So, how do you do that? Little clever tricks. So, what I would do for a kid is I would say, hey, buddy, I'd say either high five me. I'd say, hold your hand out flat like a table. Good. And I touch their hand.
Ooh.
Now, it's very strange, but if a magician ever holds your hand and does that, if I just touch it and move it slightly, you'll freeze in that position
Really?
because it's an unspoken command almost of like, I need this, hold it right there without me saying anything. So when I put the ball on their hand, I say, don't let it fall. So now the ball is going to sit there and they're not going to move their hand because in the past they do that. They look at it, they drop it on the floor, they squish it. They're kids, they're interested. But how do I get beyond that without telling them what to do? I say, hold your hand out flat and I move it a little bit so they don't move. And I go, don't let it hit the ground. And then they hold their hand there and I go, very good. Now I can pick up the ball, put it back, and now it turns into two or things like that. So,
Right.
and especially on stage, and what I do now is called mentalism. It's all psychologically based.
Wow.
That is deeply rooted in a great deal of influence and persuasion and nonverbal communication and kind of how you do that to create it to make it look like you're running around inside someone's head.
Right. Now I'm worried. Now I'm worried that you're like reading my mind without it. You're like reading my body language. You know my darkest, dirtiest secrets. But I've only met you 20 minutes ago. No, so
Oh,
I have a question. So like when you are performing for audiences, like a lot of times people there's those type of people that are they question it. Or for example, if they like say if you like fan out a deck of cards, there's always the one guy who's like, can I see the cards? How do you handle that when someone kind of changes the way your delivery is? So for example, if someone you pick a card and they're like, oh, let's look at the cards first, or maybe you have the deck set, some whatever it is, and then it messes up. How do you deal with like a situation like that?
sure. So that just kind of comes down to experience. So there are things that you can't really plan for. So I could rehearse a trick 1,000 times in front of a mirror. That's only going to get me so far. Until I actually do it for people in front of them, that's when you really work out everything that doesn't fly falls away, and you're left with just the pure essence of an effect. Restaurant magic taught me that, and any budding magicians who are kind of up and coming, go, where do I start? I always say strolling magic or restaurant magic, because that is you're doing it for 100, 200 people all night long, again and again and again, and you're just getting flight time. So for example, if someone comes up, say you're doing a card trick and they go, oh, I want to take a look at the cards. If you, don't give them reason to do that, they often won't. A big thing that I see magicians do is they'll take them out of the box and they'll hold them very, very guarded, kind of like this, or like do very,
Mhm.
very
Right.
rough shuffles, and then go, okay, hold out your finger. I'm going to spread through the cards, and then I want you to touch one, but don't look at it yet. Like they give it very restrictive feel. So, and people are very attuned to this. So I say people have a natural BS meter. So as magicians, our job is to slide underneath that and give permission to do that. A wonderful performer I know called Apollo Robbins. He's
Oh
actually in my
yes.
pocket. If you know
Oh
Apollo,
yes. Yeah, you gotta watch your watch with that guy.
very much so. But I've seen him lecture before, and he talks a great deal about the psychology of that. So, for example, standing next to someone to get close enough to them to pick their pockets. How do
Mhm.
you do that? He talks about eye contact. If I'm standing straight in front of you and I look you in the eye, and then I move to the beside you, but still maintaining eye contact, that feels weird.
Mhm.
You've just breached my bubble. That feels a little odd. But if I make eye contact with you, break eye contact, look at the audience, and then step next to you, that feels much more safe.
Wow.
I've let you inside of my bubble now. When I would do strolling magic at restaurants, the whole thing was an applied psychology course at that point, because people will stand in groups,
Mhm.
and because they're turning to face to talk to one another. So as a magician, how do you politely kind of breach that barrier? Because I can't go, hi, excuse me, hi, everyone stop talking. I'm going to do a magic trick for you now. That's just a jerk thing to do.
Right.
So how do you kind of breach that realm there? One of the things that I used to do is I would carry around a fire wallet.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
magic prop, so it's a wallet where you can strike it and there's flint inside of it and it'll look like it's on fire.
Mhm.
And I would drop the wallet on the floor and I'd walk past them. This is an idea from David Stone, great magician as well. And I'd walk close to them and I'd kind of kneel down and go, sorry, excuse me. And I reach down to pick up the wallet and I go, sorry guys, did someone drop a wallet?
Oh.
And everyone turns to look at you and go, oh God. And they look and pat, and I open the wallet and it lights on fire. Everyone's like, oh, what the fuck? And then I close it and go, oh, sorry, I'm the house magician. Now everyone's like, oh my God, you scared me. That was so cool. I'm like, that's pretty. Do you want to see another one? Oh, sure. So now you breached that gap without interrupting or getting in anybody's way. So there's a lot of little psychological bits just to make it okay to start doing things. And then once you understand that and how humans behave and how humans interact with one another, that's when you start to slip in a little bit of trickery to create miracles.
So having said that, because that is just so clever. How long have you studied psychology for? Or how much study of psychology have you done? Because clearly you have a very, very good understanding of human psychology.
A great deal of time. So so magic to me, I always said it was the greatest applied psychology course you could ever take,
Mhm.
because you're dealing with people and perceptual manipulation at that point. You're understanding how people perceive things in every way, shape, and form. When I got to college, I went to the University of California, Irvine. I majored in psychology and social behavior.
Okay.
So it was very much an advanced course in what I've already. So in many ways, I would go to class and learn, oh, that's what I've been doing the whole time. I just didn't really get what that meant.
Right.
Psychologists refer to something called a diactic gaze, to where basically if I'm looking at something, you'll look at it. magicians know that just out of basic misdirection. If I put something in my hand and I look at it, you'll look at it too.
Mhm.
And then when I show that it's empty, that gives me permission to kind of do things outside of that.
Wow.
But psychologists refer to other things. In mentalism, there's techniques called cold reading, to where it makes it seem like I know a lot about you.
Mhm.
This has been studied by psychologists for a great deal of time. So things like confirmation bias or fundamental attribution errors, and
Wow.
how all that comes together. There was a great story I saw. Um, Actually, one of my professors inadvertently saw me at the Magic Castle because
Really?
I was doing a week and I was still going to classes. And I think it was social psychology. And then he came and saw me at the castle doing mentalism. And then the next day in class goes, so I met someone the other day. And we kind of talked about it, of like what I was doing and why it worked and things like that. So it's been really my whole life has been dedicated to this in some way, shape, and or form. Um, but really coming to pass as to what it is. And I'll give you a great story, actually. There was I forget his name, but it was a horse. This is going to sound weird,
Yeah.
but it was a horse who could apparently do math. And this blew people away. This is almost 100 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
It was a horse that could supposedly do math. And everyone was stupefied by this, because what they would do is they would take a chalkboard and they'd write like 2 + 2, and they'd hold it up to the horse, and the horse would start to stomp, and it would stomp 4 times. And
Wow.
everyone, what? And they would do just basic arithmetic, but it would be like 7 + 3, and he would stomp 10 times. And audiences would cheer and go crazy. And it wasn't until behavioral psychologists, people like Thorndike and B.F. Skinner, who
Mhm.
talked about like classical conditioning, realized that the horse learned to just keep stomping. So how they solved this is they put blinders on the horse, so the horse couldn't see. Couldn't
Wow.
see the problem, but they would say the problem, or they would show it to him and then blind the horse. But the horse would just keep stomping and
Okay.
would just keep going. The horse would stop when the audience clapped, and the audience clapped when it got to the right number.
Wow.
So they'd say 2 + 2 is 4, and the horse would stomp 4 times. But once it got to 4, everyone would go, "That's amazing!" and then start clapping. So the horse would
Wow.
stop. So
Really?
we kind of tricked ourselves there. And human beings are narrative beings, so we
Right.
like stories. So that's a very appetizing story that we can latch on to. So
Right.
there's tons of things like that all throughout magic and mentalism, and just this kind of odd vaudevillian style of entertaining.
Right. And speaking of like the reaction, what is that? Is that one of your favorite parts about your show is when you do a show routine? Because I'm sure you have like you have a routine you do for like shows that you so maybe end on the same same trick. Is there like one trick that you just that when you're doing you're like, oh, this is gonna be great? Do you have one of those ones?
Yeah, there's quite a few that depending on the group as well. The nice thing about mentalism is it's very malleable. So
Mhm.
you can do a lot of different things, and it varies with a lot of different people. So how people think of information and what that information is going to elicit different responses from other people. Um, I once did a show for Lamborghini,
The
and it was all
Lamborghini, the
sales.
cars?
Yeah, the car company,
Wow.
and it was all sales. It was their sales team. So I knew for that group, in terms of sales, things like, um, well, first of all, one of the reasons I was there is because they were deeply interested in this like body language and this kind of psychology, because that a lot of sales is that.
Right.
So what they would value would be like the value of a car, or the amount of money that someone had in their pocket,
Mhm.
or things like that, as opposed to say the name of my dog that I had when I was a child.
Right.
Though that is still impactful, but the setting calls for different things. So when I perform for colleges, for example, college students love um, things that are a bit more personal. So I would do things like think about the name of the first person you ever had a crush on. Think about the last person you ever kissed. Think about the name of the dog that you had as a child. What was that one present you never got for Christmas?
Wow.
Things like that.
Right.
So it varies between the audiences. But one effect that I do love doing, and it doesn't really elicit a oh my God, kind of what I call David Blaine reactions,
Yeah.
kind of what the what, and people running away. There's a time and a place for those things, and those are great responses. But
Right.
I love this effect. It's actually on my YouTube page. Um, in writing, it's called PK touches or psychokinetic touches. But
Yeah.
basically, one person is blindfolded. I touch one person, and they feel it.
Mhm.
So it's an unseen connection between two people, and I love that because it's what I call a slow burn. It's the setup and the payoff are in two different places, but where they align, no one can really tell. If I were to take a coin, put it in my hand and go, and it's gone, that's the reaction moment, because you realize setup, it goes in the hand, something happened, payoff, the coin vanished, wonderful job. But when I do this, I never say what's going to happen. People discover it along the way. And I'll often do that, and sometimes I'll double up on it. So I'll touch this one person. Did you feel anything? Yeah, I felt that. And they touch it on their head and their hands and everything. And I'll just keep going, or I'll touch other people and then they still feel it. And it's not until the effect is done that people realize what happened or what occurred. So they're discovering it as it's happening in front of them. And I've been doing that effect for a very long time, but it's what I call a slow burn and a peripheral effect.
Okay.
The effect is happening. The payoff and the resolution are in the same moment, but where that happens, no one really knows. It happens different for every people. And I also don't pay a lot of attention to it. And that almost heightens it, especially in mentalism. So here's a great subtlety that I do. I'll be in the middle of a show and I'll go, you sir in the back there, think of the name of your favorite teacher in high school.
Right.
Think about that. Okay. Just imagine their name written. I'm sorry, ma'am over here. And then I'll write something down and go, do you have a pet? Go, yeah, I have a pet parrot named Steve. And I turn it around and it says Steve. And I go, I need you to stop thinking about that. I'm trying to concentrate. And then I go back to this guy. What? Like that is way more impressive to audiences than what my initial effect was, what my initial going for was just these little nuggets that I find along the way. Or if I bring someone up on stage and I need to use the calculator on their phone, but their phone's locked, I go, oh, sorry, think of your passcode. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, cool. And then I go to their calculator.
Really?
These little things of people going, okay, yeah, the calculator trick was cool. How the hell did you get the passcode?
Yeah.
But if I don't pay attention to that, that almost heightens it. It brings a sense of theatricality to it that people aren't really leading you down the wrong path with these little breadcrumbs and then walloping you right across the head.
I think people undercredit magicians because, like, in a trick like that, you don't know those people, and in that case, you can know their passcode without them telling you. That's impressive. I think people like don't understand that. It's like, oh, it's a gimmick. No, like that's a random person with a random phone. Like the amount of like practice that's gone into that. You need to be on the spot like that. So do certain audiences give you more challenges than others? For example, are college students more harder to read, harder to do your stuff on than maybe like a more predictable, like salesmen who are going to be more composed, professional than college students on a Friday night?
Mm-hmm. I get this question a lot, and the answer is it's different with everybody. So mentalism is very intriguing because it's this line of psychology and magic that kind of blends the two together, and it's indicative on other people. So I could do a card trick for you, and then I do a card trick for someone else, and it's the exact same thing, same pattern, same technique, same everything, and it works every time. But with mentalism, it might be a little trickier. So for example, some people may be a bit more receptive to it, or might be a little, I don't like the phrase easier to read because that implies that like, oh, you're just an open book, or oh, you're very easy to figure out.
Right.
Not that at all. It's everyone thinks differently. So it's a matter of me figuring out how they're thinking, how they're perceiving something. And then like the analogy I used before, just being one step ahead of that.
Right.
So, and in many ways, you can almost outthink an overthinker. So for example, if I were to ask someone to think of any letter in the alphabet, and if I were to be with somebody, and honestly, it's just a feeling. Like whenever magicians pick audience members, if you're watching this and you go to a magic show and you're like, I hate magic shows because I always get picked. They always bring me up on stage. The reason we do that is because we're just going off of a pure vibe or a pure feel of like, this just seems like a very sweet person that I would talk to in just normal everyday life. So magicians aren't really thinking about like, oh, this person would be perfect, or oh, this person's not going to see anything. It's not that at all. You just seem like a very sweet person who I think being a part of this would just heighten it, would just make this a pleasant experience for me and for everybody. But if I were to get that vibe from someone of like, you're just kind of going with the flow and yeah, let's give it a shot. And I say, think of any letter in the alphabet. That's going to be trickier than if someone goes, okay, magic boy, read my mind. That guy is going to think of either Q or Z. Because in his head, he's gone, okay, everyone thinks of A or B or the first letter of their name. Z's like at the end of the alphabet, and Q's just supposedly a random letter that doesn't appear that much.
Right.
Since I know that, it now makes it easier. It now kind of whittles it down for me of going, okay, it's likely going to be Q or Z. To where if someone's much more open to this, they're going to choose any dang letter they like. So now I'm going to have do a little more work to get there. So it's very much dependent upon the person, dependent upon the venue, depending upon what I'm there to do. Because at the end of the day, my job is to be an entertainer. My job
Right.
is to make the time spent together worth it and fun and engaging and memorable.
Mhm.
So if, say, when I work at colleges, for example, everyone's just there to make memories and have a good time.
Right.
So the show is always about the audience. And that's true of any kind of magic or mentalism, especially mentalism, because it's your thoughts and your behaviors. So it's always about them. My job is to be kind of like a lightning rod
Mhm.
and take what's given to me and just channel it back to them in a fun and intriguing way. Same thing with corporate dinners and for sales meetings and heck, even restaurants. Everyone just wants to have a good time. My job is to figure out what I do and how that can translate to be fun and engaging, which thankfully it is most of the time.
That's awesome. So I have a
Mhm.
question because I like when I do these shows, I like to, I like to ask questions that I know you're not going to get asked a ton. So like networking is a magician, so I brought on all sorts of different people. And so how does that work? So how do you like get new contacts? For example, I know the Magic Castle is probably just a hub, because these are all the best of the best. You're all, in a room together, locked in a room, talking, next to each other. But like other than that, like how do magicians network or like book events or,
Mhm.
find new venues type of thing? I've just always wondered how that works.
Yeah, it's a big part of the business, but not one that's really talked about.
Mhm.
Mostly when you talk to other magicians, it's going to be technique based.
Yep.
How you do the trick. It's an entirely different beast as to how do you get the gig to then go do the trick for people.
Mhm.
So networking, at least for me, probably 80% of my work comes from word of mouth.
Mhm.
Meaning, I saw you at this event. My husband's turning 50. Would you come and do his birthday? Sure. When I do that, I'm a part of the HR department of my company. We're trying to do like a big end of the year thing for our quarter. Would you come and do it there? Sure. And it just kind of networks from there. So I always operate under the notion of every show you do is an audition for the next show because you never know who's in your audience and you never know what's going to come of it. For example, when I worked for Lamborghini, that came because one of the higher ups of the company just happened to go to that restaurant that night. And I just happened to go to their table
Wow.
and I did a trick for them. And he was with his son. And I did a trick and I gave him I fused two cards together and I gave it to him. Another great example in terms of networking, I do a trick. It's rather well known. It's called the Anniversary Waltz,
All
where
right.
two people sign playing cards. They hold them between their hands and then the cards fuse together
Wow.
and it creates this impossible object and I give it to them, they can keep it. I do that trick a ton, especially like in strolling settings. If someone's on a first date, that's fantastic because they now get this souvenir of like, oh, it's your name and mine. Do you remember that
Uh,
time magician? I did this for a company mixer and I later interned for this company. But I show up and I did this trick for them and I didn't know who these people were. I later showed up and I got an internship. This is when I was in college, got an internship with this company. And when I was working there, the CFO, the chief financial
yeah.
officer, goes, come into my office. And I'm thinking, oh no. I go into his office and pinned on his board right behind him is that card. I did it for him and the CEO of the company. I didn't know. These were just two.
Right.
And he pulls it off and he goes, you did this, right? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I use this as a talking point in my meetings. So when I meet with because the company is also affiliated with companies in Japan, or he needs to talk to people, he'll bring this and show it to them. It's like, this is super cool. There was a magician and it was me and I didn't know this guy and he did this and it was insane. And I still don't know how it works. So he's like, I use this as a talking point.
Wow.
You never ever know who you're going to affect or who you're going to do this for or what it's going to mean to them. I've had people that same effect come back a year later at that same restaurant going, it's our 1 year anniversary. And we still keep, that was on our first date and we
Right.
still keep it. It's in our little hope chest. So you never know what you're going to do and what kind of impact it's going to have on people. But I'm sorry, back to original networking. So 80% is that. Probably the remaining 20% would either be social media. So folks like yourself reaching out to me on Instagram. Sometime, honestly, like working with the castle is great. It's a beautiful feather in your cap because you can now go from magician to award-winning Magic Castle magician. It
Yeah.
adds a few more words and it really boosts your your credibility there. Sometimes people will contact the castle and say, I'm looking for someone like this. Do you have any recommendations? And they'll send that out to magicians who they know. And the remainder is references. So obviously with the pandemic, it's been very different. Magic has gotten a huge hit from this because live events, trade shows, corporate events have all subsided. So we've transitioned to virtually.
Mm-hmm.
But even before that, and even still now, if the workflow is a bit much for us to handle, we'll refer out. So I have a list of a few of my magic buddies who I've performed for years, that if I get an inquiry going, hey, I want you to come and perform at my wedding, it's this Saturday. Well, I already have a gig that Saturday, I can't make it. But here's 3 names of dynamite magicians that I've worked with who may be available. And now my buddy John has a gig. Right. And equally, if John can't do one, he'll refer out to me and I go, okay, I'll step in and do that. So it's it's a self-feeding cycle of every show you do, you try to do the best that you can, not only to be entertaining, but also you never know who's in the audience. That's and true. Who's going to potentially hire you next.
That's true. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about virtual magic and how has that impacted magicians? I mean, there are different types of magicians. You know, there's like silent magicians, you know, people like Shin Lim, for example, where he could probably do it pretty easily virtual. You know, he just needs a camera. But there's some where you need the audience. For example, mentalism is probably very hard to do virtually. It can probably be done, but it's a lot more difficult than if I'm saying next to you, I'm sure. You know, so how has it impacted just the magic industry? Or you know, how have you, do you do virtual shows now, I'm assuming?
I do, yeah. So virtual magic has been a beautiful challenge. It's a beautiful monster in the best way I can describe it. It has been a remarkable creative challenge because it's forced now all of us to be on the same level playing field of going, okay, we have people in their own homes, not even in the same room. Can we still amaze them? And can we still do things without them actually being physically present? And mentalism is actually a very nice conduit to that, because mentalism is all you need is another mind. All you need is another person. So a lot of it can be done verbally. So for example, I do a routine, a roulette style routine with staple guns.
Oh, yes.
I'll have four staple guns and I load one of them and I mix them all up. The audience mixes them up too. And then I have an audience member pick one, 2, 3, or 4, whichever one they pick, I staple into my hand, hopefully avoiding the one that is loaded.
Right.
I do that on stage and I have the person up there and I have the person come up and it's very dramatic and they put it on my palm or put it on my neck or anything. And they're the one that squeezes it. I can still do that effect virtually because in reality, all I really need is, okay, we know that number 3 is loaded. I'm going to mix them up so the audience doesn't know. And then I say, Aaron, pick 1, 2, 3, or 4. Right. Say you pick number 4. Okay. Oh, thank goodness I'm safe. So it's the same effect, just twisted a little bit.
Right.
I've also been doing a lot of, outside of mentalism, I've been doing a lot of children's hospitals.
Virtually?
Which has been wonderful. So virtual has really opened up. I've now performed for a children's hospital in Missouri and Arizona and Nevada, all of these places without ever leaving my room, but done so in a way on almost a grander scale that I couldn't before. I've performed in hospitals ever since I started. So that's just been a soft spot for me. I love hospitals. I will do them for free anytime, anywhere. I'm more than happy to. But virtual has really opened it up because, in fact, a couple of weeks ago for a hospital called Children's Mercy in Missouri, they would patch me into their hospital station. So they all have TV, like a TV channel that broadcasts to all the patient rooms. So now a guy in California can set up his computer and do a show. There's no audience there. So it's kind of Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer of, hey, everybody, I'm kind of talking to myself.
Like one-sided.
Yeah. But now 300 children who maybe couldn't, if I were there in person, who maybe couldn't leave their rooms to come and see me, can now experience and be a part of the show. So in ways how it has drawn us back, in several other ways it has opened up a huge world to us that wasn't there before. So it's really been like I say, a beautiful monster. It's given us a lot of obstacles to come over, but it's also opened up a whole new world of possibility.
I agree with this pandemic. I think people don't realize that, like, people like these, like what you and I are doing right now, like that this is possible because of it. And people are like, I think people don't realize that if you just reach out, the worst someone can say is no. And that with virtual, now your networks are endless, right? You can talk to anyone now really easily. Because before, if you came to my college, maybe I'd interview you after the show. Whereas now I could just say, hey, Mark, do you want to join a show? So have there been any things that still are a challenge with virtual, like any like specific tricks that you like that some magicians you can't do virtually? Is there any, type of magic that has to be in person?
There are certain things that lend themselves to being done in person or are indicative of working in person. The biggest part of it, honestly, it has very little to do with the actual technique of magic. It just has to do with the interpersonal connection with people.
Okay.
One of my favorite magicians of all time, his name is David Williamson. Fantastic performer. But the biggest reason you go to see a David Williamson show is because it's David Williamson. You don't really go to see, oh, I hope he does the needle trick, or I hope he does the thing with the rope. He'll do those things,
Right.
but you go because it's him.
Mm-hmm.
He's hilarious, and he's dealing with people, and he brings people up on stage, and kind of the banter, he goes back and forth, and he's going off script, and he's improvising a lot. Wow. And it's just a zany, fun time. And I analyze myself in that way of going, once you take everything away, what's left? And I think that's a very good benchmark for every performer of going, if my hands were broken tomorrow and I just couldn't do it, but I could do some things,
Mm-hmm.
would it still be at the level that I would like it to be? Not because the technique of what it is. I could do a trick and it plays okay. David Copperfield could do a trick and people are weeping. So it is the exact same effect. So it's all about presentation and personality. So that has been a big drop off virtually is, yes, more people can see it, but there's a whole nother element of a tactile experience with people that is very challenging. I know some friends who are comedians who that is a very big part of it because almost all of stand-up comedy is a relationship with the audience.
Exactly.
If your cameras are off or everybody's muted, not only is there no applause now or any laughter, so you don't know if this is working or not,
right,
but you're also missing this key element of we're all inhabiting the same space and experiencing this in the same time. And even some of the best moments, even in my own shows, happen in an unplanned way.
Right.
If I'm working in like a comedy club or something, if a waitress walks by during a point of the show or something, or says something, or someone in the back of the audience shouts out or says something or does something, just there's a responsiveness, there's a reaction to it that's always positive and good that you can kind of glean from, to where if it's only virtual. Now, that is to say, that affects performers like me. You mentioned someone like Shin Lim. Right. Virtual, in my eyes, would be almost unaffected by that because his show is very, I call it eye candy. It's very right in your face. It's beautiful. It looks great.
Oh, yeah.
It's very much a feast for the eyes. It is very much that.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas performers like David Williamson or myself, or to where almost talking isn't, you have to do that. So for example, mentalism, a big shortcoming is it's difficult to do in other countries. Meaning if I don't speak the language, it can't be tricky. To whereas Shin Lim does have a universality to him, because magic is a universal language in the fact of its visual nature. But when you start to do things like mentalism, for example, look into a book and think of a word and I tell you what word that is. If I don't speak the language, A, it's going to be difficult to give that instruction, and B, I may not even know what the heck you're thinking about because you're thinking in a different language. So there's certain roadblocks to kind of understand and overcome, but that's just a part of the creative process.
Right now, I don't know if this is a genuine question I have. Can mentalism be done silently? So is someone like Shin Lim or like Teller from Penn and Teller, for example, like they're both silent on stage at least. Could mentalism be done in, or parts of it? Probably not a whole trick because you have to ask them, hey, what's this? But are there certain aspects that you could do in silence if you really wanted to? Yes. Okay.
There certainly are. And there's certain elements and subtleties that I do to where it is done silently. It's very tricky to do, but it is possible. So in terms of it being done silently, there's actually a great effect out that's been marketed. It's called the silent treatment, to where you walk out on stage, you don't say anything, but you have flashcards and you kind of flip through them and it kind of walks someone through a trick. And one says like, think of a card. Do you have one? Good. And you keep flipping through until the very end, you realize why you haven't been talking this whole time is because there's a card in your mouth. and you take it out, open it up, and it's the card they were thinking of.
Right.
Beautiful effect, but that's one that can be done without speaking. So you do have to have a conduit of communication because there is a process there, but it is nonetheless possible. Mentalism is very much with thoughts and ideas. So it is possible to visually represent an idea, which has been a personal obsession of mine, is how do you take something that at its core is, think of something. It was that, right? Yep. At its very core, that's what 90% of mentalism is. Not all of it, but that's a fair majority. So how do you make that theatrical and make that play? So one of the things that I would do is I would invite someone up on stage and I'd say, I don't know, think of a number up to 1,000. Or now think of the name of someone you know. Great example, great. Stand here, and I'd stand on the other side of the stage. Go, I'm going to say some statements. If they're correct, take a step towards me. Okay, I'll go, great. This is a female, and they take a step. And I go, this is your best friend from school, take a step. You've known them for 10 years, take a step. Until they're right here, and then I go, if I'm right, give me a high five. Their name's Beth. Give her a round of applause. It's the same effect, but that translates to hundreds of people because the confirmation is nonverbal, to whereas if they just went,
right,
I might hear that, but no one else did.
true.
So it's depending on the venue and where you're at of how to kind of dress it.
That's
Yes, it is possible to do mentalism silently. It's just very hard.
I could really imagine. And it's cool too. Like as magic's progressing, have you noticed that's changed? Now there's these magicians that do these fantastic, like digital, you're getting like video and stuff, all these types of elements in the shows, with like iPads and things and stuff. Do you think that's where magic's going to be moving toward? Do you think more, or do you think it's still going to have that, original, real hands-on, like deck of cards? Like you can't digitize a deck of cards. You're going to have like a paper cards. Do you think that's going to stick around? Or you think the technology will?
I think technology certainly has a place in magic, but it will never replace what has worked time and time again. In the same way that effects that were done, in fact, the cups and balls is considered one of the greatest effects ever in magic. There's hieroglyphics of that trick being done on pyramid walls. On every human culture across the world, there is documentation of that particular effect being done. And there's a reason that it works, is because it hits almost everything that's possible in the realm of magic. There's vanish, transposition, transformation, multiplication. There's a lot of different penetration, cups going through one another or balls going through the cups, and an impossible payoff. So it follows a very neat story structure, and there's a reason it works. So there's things like that to where you could have a robot doing that, and it'll get it so far, but there's nothing that's going to possibly get past the human interaction. One of the things that I've done in response to technology is, in many ways, it's helped me kind of think our way out of methods. So oftentimes when I do tricks or something, and I give someone a pad of paper and I go, here, draw a picture. And I give them a marker and they draw a picture and they hold it close to themselves. And I go, okay, think about it. And then I duplicate the picture. It's called a drawing duplication. Very, very old concept. I've had people come up to me after the show going, oh, it's one of those Bluetooth pens.
Right.
That you write something and it like digitizes to an iPad, and then you can just peek at it and then know what the drawing is, because those exist. So my way around that is, instead of a pen, I'll give them a golf pencil.
Oh, wow.
And then I'll let them keep it. So now that method's out of the water. So in many ways, technology has helped in terms of it makes things that were once impossible very possible in a much cleaner way. But it also, I know that my audiences understand that. So if I go backwards to the way that it was originally done in like the 1800s, that is now almost way more impressive because, well, it was just a golf pencil and a piece of paper. It wasn't draw this on your phone and then lock your phone, because that can be hacked, and then that is somehow like there's a whole network of things. It's just way more, again, that process is very streamlined using very simple prompts. So the prompts that I use in my show are intended to be very, very simple. They're things like Sharpie markers and a drawing pad that I got at Kmart and golf pencils, because it inherently brings, okay, if you can do this and it just looks like nothing, that's almost way more impressive than if you were to do it through a technological base.
True.
I'll give you a great notion. This is a great example of magician thinking and non-magician thinking. There's an effect called the tossed out deck. Very popular, very common. I do it in my show. You take out a deck of cards, you rubber band them, you toss them into the audience, you say, flip through the deck and think of a card.
Mhm.
And 4 people do that. Everyone stands up and you go, okay, 4 of spades, king of diamonds, 9 of clubs, and the 2 of hearts. And everyone sits down. You got all the cards correct. Beautiful effect. I still do it.
Yep.
It wasn't until I went to college that I figured out what I was doing wrong, because I was in a statistics course. And the professor said, how likely are you to pick a king of clubs out of a 52 deck of cards? So 1 in 52.
Right.
He goes, how about 5 decks of cards? And we would use it as an example of how to statistically, how likely are you to
Right.
get over that? So he had a bunch of decks of cards for the class. So he dumps them out of a box and there's a bunch of cards and they're held together by a rubber band. And then he tosses them out to the students. And my mind exploded, because anytime I did that, people said, oh, it's a trick deck.
Right.
But when he did it, and when I started doing it this other way, what I would do is I would take out a deck in a box, take it out of the box, put a rubber band around it, and then throw it into the audience, supposedly to keep the deck together so it doesn't.
Yeah. So, bro.
I missed that step. If I take it out of the box, people think it's a trick deck. If I just reach into my pocket with a deck of cards with a rubber band already around it and just don't pay any attention to it and then throw it into the deck, that now is a miracle, because that's how non-magicians treat playing cards. Magicians are very guarded in how because magicians do have very expensive gimmicked cards or designer decks. So we take good care of them. We put them in boxes and we put them in clips and everything. But if I go to a show and I take a deck out of a clip and I put it out of the box and it's very fancy and it doesn't look like the cards that I have in my junk drawer that have been there forever, I'm going to be inherently suspicious. There may not be any gimmicks there, but I'm still going to have my alarms up, and that's not good. So now I almost go backwards in terms of advancements, like you say, in technology, or advancements in just how things are. I go backwards, because if I just take out I almost always use red bicycle cards, because they're the most common deck of cards on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee if you're watching this right now and you go look in that junk drawer in your kitchen, you're likely going to have a deck of bicycle cards in it. Exactly. The most common in North America, the most common kinds of cards. So I use those, because when I bring them out, people their alarms don't go off, because like, oh, they just looks like what they are. And especially if I have them rubber banded when I do that effect and I throw them out, there's now no alarm bells going off, because that looks like what people do with cards. So, and that's a big hurdle for magicians. We're so used to magical thinking,
right,
that to do it for people, we have to almost unlearn a lot of things to make it applicable.
Oh, I bet. I think it's funny. It's funny. I'm sure you've heard weird ways that people think you're doing it when you're doing a simple mentalism trick with a pen and paper, and people. I think there's all this like earpieces and this is and that. You're like, dude, I'm like walking around a restaurant. There's no like I'm not looking at like another monitor. Like we're like I love when people like I do see like the simple like the slide hand trick, and people are like, what? Or, like, how are you doing? Or it's a rigged deck. I'm like, it's not. I pulled it out of my pocket. But I do find it interesting that I thought it'd be the opposite way around, that if you pull the deck out of your pocket with rubber bands, people will be like, oh, there's something wrong like that, because then you would have had to preset that, versus if you're taking it out of the box, I would think that it's not preset. So I think that's interesting, like things like that you'd have to think of.
It's the little things your audience, and I say this to every performer I meet, your audience will teach you more about magic than any book, any magician, any DVD, any download, anything will ever teach you ever. Your audience will teach you how to do it. And the only way to do that is to get out and perform and do it for real people. Right. So there are things that I do that for years I thought I was doing it the proper way, but it just wasn't getting the response that I was looking for, or it wasn't getting that like, oh my goodness. And it wasn't until I started to listen to my audience and what they were thinking, and then start to meld it into that it started to make sense, and it started to get those responses. Right. Even things like timing, but again, I tend to ramble. But things like rubber banding a deck to make it look normal, that I would never read that in a book, and just left to my own devices, I would never see that. Right. Which, like, the most important people in my development as a performer are the people who don't look at magic ever. So I have friends who aren't fans of magic, they're not magicians, but they know I do magic. I will run, if I'm working on something new, I'll run it by them and go, what do you think? Because A, they're going to be honest with me. B, if it gets by them, I know it's good. And C, they'll go, that was weird. Or like, why do I need to do that? Or because there'll be things that I do that to me make sense of like,
Right.
okay, maybe I have a list of 100 places on my phone in the Notes app, and you're going to pick a number between 1 and 100, but I can predict what number you're going to pick and what the place is. Cool, that looks great. And I'll show it to them, and I'll go, okay, here's 100 places on my phone. And they go, why do you have 100 places on your phone?
True.
And I'm like, no, that's not, the trick is this, but all I see is the trick. But they're going, who the hell has a Notes app of 100 places that are all different? And like, who does that? And why does that matter? But that's huge, because if I go up to people and do that, they're going to think that. And now it inherently goes, well, that's weird. So this must be a magical thing.
Right.
So now, for example, I do an effect like that where I have a Notes on my phone. It will be the names of movies. So I'll also have like the top 100 movies on there, and I'll predict what movie they're going to choose. I'll say, do you ever go to Netflix and you're looking through, there's thousands of things on Netflix, but you can't pick something to watch? We've all done that.
Oh.
I've fixed that problem. I went to Google and I downloaded the top 100 movies ever, just the top 100.
Right.
So when I'm bored and I want to watch something, I just pick a number or roll a pair of dice and go, I don't know, 14, and then go to 14, whatever movie that is, that's what I watch. It's a way of taking the choice out of it. It's fate. It just kind of finds its way, and I don't have to make a choice.
Right.
You're going to do something similar to that. Think of a number between 1 and 100. And now I'm into the exact same trick of pick a number. I predicted what movie you'd see.
Right.
But it doesn't feel weird that I now have this Notes thing, and it feels more organic.
Right.
So again, the whole process of magic is taking something that is inherently difficult, making it look like nothing's happening, to then make it impossible.
Right. As somebody who's not very in tune in magic, I'm very aware of magic. I like to learn how certain things, because I just like to see like, oh, this, but that's what's it is important to me. I like the stories to figure out the lead in. I think that's what you guys call it, right? For example, I need to get this list of 100 things to my audience, but I don't know how. And I just, it's inspiring to see how they do that, because that's really difficult to do, to like get like give credibility. Like, who has 100 things on their phone, but you're like, well, I have a problem to solve. Like that's almost the hard part, I think, is, because you can do the trick, but like people have to believe like what's relevant. Like, we're standing in a field, like why you just like have a deck of cards in your pocket, type of thing. And that's gotta be something.
For probably 8 years now, I teach theater and improvisation to high school students. And I've been doing it virtually as well. But when you do these improv shows, if any of you have ever seen improvisation before, they're based on suggestions. So you go, we're going to do a scene for you here now. I need a suggestion of something that begins with the letter M, or give me a place anywhere in the world, or a relationship between two people. And that's what you base the scene on. I didn't realize this till probably 4 years into being an improviser, of going, I'm doing the exact same thing in mentalism. I'm standing on stage and going, someone anywhere, give me a random thing. Except all I'm doing is saying, don't say it out loud. I'll do that. It's almost the exact same interplay. But improv taught me a huge thing about making mentalism theatrical, because a lot of people think mentalism is really boring. And it is. I'll be completely honest, it really is, because it feels like a ton of process to get to a payoff for something that's no more than a puzzle. Meaning, if I predicted a number that you were thinking of, but the whole process was, think of your age, now double it, now subtract 5, now take your dog's age and add it to that, and then divide by 4, think of that number, it's 7, right? Yeah. Well, that's not really impressive, because you clearly just went through some mathematical formula to get to this outcome.
Right.
I don't know what that math formula is, but I at least know that's what it was. So yeah, mentalism can be very boring, but improv taught me a great deal about how to make it interesting, because in an improv show, it's just people on stage doing things for people in the audience.
Right.
And how we get that is that interplay with the audience. So I'll do a thing if I need to get someone at random. People are very aware that stooging is a thing.
Oh yeah.
Going to someone and being like, hey, I'm doing a show later. Can you just think of this and help me out? Okay, great. Here's $20. And then in the show, I can go, you, sir, your name is Charles. Yes. Oh, wow, that's a miracle. But I just asked him to do that. People are very aware of that. I don't do that. Never have, never will. But I'm aware audiences think that way. So I need to think outside of that.
Right.
Improv taught me a great thing of how do you randomly find people. They would do a game on stage to where we invite a random audience member up. So what they do is they take a balloon, they blow it up,
Hmm.
and then play some fun music, bop it into the audience, and go, keep the balloon in the air. When the music stops, whoever catches it, you're going to come up on stage. So now the audience is going nuts and they're popping this balloon, and then the music stops and someone grabs it and you go, you sir, come on up. That's way better than going, you there in the back with the hair.
Right.
Way better. And it completely eradicates the idea of I could have known this person was going to come up on stage.
Right.
So little things like that that you pull from different elements of your life can feed into this. That makes it way more impossible, but also way more organic.
Right.
Because that's what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like someone on stage who has an extraordinary ability, who's able to somehow just poke around inside of your head. And it's a wonderful kind of entertainment.
Now, do you ever look at shows like for like Penn and Teller Fool Us or things like that for inspiration to get? Because those, I believe that you have to create the trick that you're performing. So do you ever look at that to see like new tricks or like new ways people are doing it as a mentalist? Is that like what magicians do sometimes? It's they kind of learn from each other, like, oh, I like the way you did that, or like, how did you do that? But I do it this way.
Big time. Big time. So I love shows like Penn and Teller Fool Us. I've had a couple of friends that have gone on the show and have fooled them. Kevin Lee, he was a junior along with me. I think Frankie's going to be in the next season, but I love that show because I look at it in a different light, basically. People who aren't magicians look at it going, whoa, that's cool. Like that's an interesting effect. But when you're a magician, you're looking at it through very different eyes. So I oftentimes don't even look for methodology of like how the trick worked. I look more as to that in an entertainment venue made way more sense than a great example is an effect called the chop cup. It's a very old trick, but it's basically a cup and a ball. Ball vanishes, appears under the cup, goes through the ball. There's a lot of different phases to it, but it's basically a ball and a cup. Okay, it's all right, but no one has, because these cups, they look like goblets. No one has this cup that is meant to be upside down. Cups are meant to hold liquid. So when I see a magician walk out on stage going, here's a trick with an empty Pringles can and a tiny little baby potato. It's the exact same trick. He's doing the chop cup, the same technique, the same everything, but it looks way different and it does not feel weird. It doesn't feel like a magic prop and it plays much, 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 much better. So I love watching shows like that, or like Justin Willman's Magic for Humans. Beautiful, beautiful show. And again, kind of harkens to what I'm talking about. It's magic for humans, magic for real world people. Right. And Justin Willman is a brilliant innovator in that way. Shows like that, David Blaine was kind of the first to really kind of, I don't want to say demystify magic, but kind of take it out of this standing on stage with the top hat and I pull a bunny out of the hat and take it into the streets. He invented something called street magic. It's very much just magic done in a very seemingly impromptu way. Right. So yeah, I love shows like that, mainly just as inspiration of like, never thought of doing it like that.
I think what's cool, you mentioned David Blaine. I think a lot of people don't realize, obviously he does like sleight of hand and whatnot, but a lot of the things he does, he genuinely does. Like there's no like trickery. Like some of those tricks are just genuinely done, like swallowing frogs and stuff. Like there's no sleight of hand. I'm pretty sure he does it. And like that's impressive. You know, people just, like I said earlier, like people undercredit magicians for the things you do, because sometimes people would think it's gimmick and it's genuinely just done. Like, and I think that's great. Now, what is your thoughts on shows where they give up the tricks? I forgot what it was called. It's like Greatest Tricks Revealed. There's like a show. I forgot the
Master Magician.
Yeah, what is your because those are like core tricks, that there's different variations of it, but those are like the base ones that I know a lot of magicians use. So does that challenge you guys, now that the public can see things like that and you're like, oh no?
And I love it. So for two reasons. One, it breeds in it often will inspire people into magic. So I remember seeing shows like that when I was a kid and being fascinated by it, of going, oh, this is okay. Like I'm learning about this thing that the whole point, many people ask, how do you get new magicians if the whole point is to keep it a secret? That's a valid argument. Like how do you learn something that no one's supposed to talk about? So it can be challenging. So shows like that are great to inspire new magicians. But I love it when audiences watch it because you're now not controlling their thinking, but you're guiding their thinking into something. So I might watch that show and they go, here's how to do the trick where a mind reading trick, for example. You pick a card and I tell you what cards you're thinking of. Here's how you do that trick. You have a deck of cards where all of them are the same. And the audience is going to go, oh, I know how to do that trick. So now when I go on stage and I go, here, pick a card. I'm going to tell you what card you're thinking of. They're going to go, oh, I know how to do this. All the cards are the same. And I go, before we start, all the cards are different, right? And they're going to go, wait. And then I still do it. Now they're going, damn it, okay, fine. That's a very simple premise,
Right.
but it allows me to track and go, this is how audiences think things are done. All I have to do is think one step beyond that, and now the whole thing's blown.
Right.
So this is how you cut somebody in half and you put them in a box and everything, and there's a secret trap door that they go onto the stage. So they're never ever in the box. Okay, well, I just think of a different method to do that.
Right.
And now the integrity of the effect is still there.
Right.
So if anything, it promotes people's interest in magic. Heck, Penn and Teller do that.
Yeah, they do.
The Penn and Teller show, they'll reveal tricks in their show.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, people were like, whoa, 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 why would you do that? But in many ways, the secret is way more interesting than the actual effect.
Right.
Like, and honestly, that's where I think the intrigue in magic comes from. And that's why people think it's so fascinating, especially the things that I do, like with mind reading. Yes, I'm able to do that is impressive enough, but what the heck are you doing to even get there?
Right.
Like that, if I could figure out how to do that, I could tell when people are lying or not. I could tell the password to someone's lock that they've forgotten. I can do that to open it up and set their bike free. There's a lot of there's an applicability to it that I think is very enticing to people. So that's why I like when I perform for colleges or something, oftentimes I'll lecture afterwards.
Right.
Like psychology students to go, this is the psychology behind what I'm doing. Maybe not revealing how the trick actually works, but giving you an inclination of what to look for and kind of how this comes from and where this comes from and this kind of intriguing backstory. So I'm all for it. If people want to talk about how an effect works or how it kind of comes to be, mainly because it provides just a challenge for us as magicians to think outside the box a little more.
Right. You posed a great question that I genuinely, I don't need to go into very specifics, but where do non-magicians learn the magical stuff?
Mm-hmm.
How does it work?
Yep. So there's a few different ways of going about it. How I started I began magic at the dawn of the internet era.
Okay.
Meaning magic on the internet didn't really exist when I was like 10 or 12. So I learned mostly from books.
Okay.
So I would go to the library, I would read books, and they would have methods in them. So there are magic books that magicians write, publishing the secrets to their effects. Heck, I publish tricks that I've created. They're on a site called Penguin Magic. You can go and download them and learn how to do these tricks. So there is now a vast network or like a marketplace of magic. And the internet has drastically changed that. So now there's sites like Vanishing Ink Magic or penguinmagic.com or Theory 11, that their whole premise is we're here to teach magicians. And you can download lectures and you can buy props that will help you do the effects, or DVDs or videos and things. So there are resources out there, a lot more than when I was young or when I was first starting out. A big thing that I would do would be I would watch videos of magicians and then just try and figure out how I would do it. So for example, there's something in sleight of hand called a card force.
Oh, yeah.
A sleight of hand technique to where I can get you to pick a certain card. I didn't know that existed. I just saw a magician take a card and I could tell you what it was. And I went, that's cool. Now, I want all of them to be different. So I would need to do something to make sure they take that one. So if I do this, and it took a while, but I figured out a way to do that. And I thought I was a genius because I discovered this way to do this, until I found magic books and talked to other magicians. And they went, oh yeah, that's called forcing. And there's literally hundreds of ways to do that, better than what I ever came up with.
Right.
But at the time I'm going, oh, I kind of stumbled upon it without realizing it was a thing yet.
Right.
So, but to answer your original question, yes, there's resources on the internet. You can go to sources like penguinmagic.com, Vanishing Ink Magic, Theory 11 is great. All of those are great resources to find effects and of all skill level too. It's not just like the big stage illusions and stuff. It's even just the basic, what you have around your house.
Right.
Great places to start. But also, I always tell magicians this, if you want to hide something, you put it in literature.
Okay.
Because nowadays, people don't read anymore. Very
You're
rarely
not
do you have
wrong.
people who are going to sit and read and dissect from a book how to do something. But if you have like the really good secrets that you want to market and like want to put out into the world, but you don't want a whole lot of people doing them yet, put it in a book, because very, very few people are going to take the time to do that. So if you want the really good stuff, go to books.
Books. You're right. I've never read a magic book, and I know a lot of people haven't. So if people are watching here who may want to go into magic or think about starting, where would you recommend they start? Or, what advice do you have for someone who wants to be an aspiring magician or mentalist or in just the general magic realm?
Yep. Start small. Best thing I can say is start small. Oftentimes it's very enticing to see, like when I first started, that was the heyday of Chris Angel.
Oh yeah.
It was this larger than life,
Oh,
he came from helicopters and do these
oh
fight stuff. And I was hooked. I loved it. But it was tricky because he's been doing this his whole life. So yeah, he can do things like put someone's cell phone in a beer bottle. That's huge. I can barely shuffle a deck of cards. So start with the basics. So things like card tricks, coin tricks, just things you find around your house. If you want to get in, because there's two ways of approaching magic. I know people who do magic strictly for themselves, meaning I'll read the books, I'll go to the lectures, I'll learn all this stuff because I'm just deeply fascinated with the art, but I have no intention of performing.
Right.
And that's completely fine. You can be a musician and just learn to play the guitar just for yourself and don't ever do shows. Totally fine. Magic is the same way. So you can absolutely do that. If you want to go my path, which is the path of being a performer, start with the people in your life that you trust to start to build that skill level and prepare to fail a lot.
Yeah.
A reason that there's so few magicians in the world is A, it's really hard.
Yeah, it is.
B, it lends itself to this kind of social ostracizing, if that's a word.
That is.
I learned more about performing magic in high school than I ever did as an adult.
Really?
Because when I'm in high school, A, people are going to be way more honest with you because they're your friends, but B, you're in the middle of math class. You're not in a stage to where you were able to set everything up ahead of time. You have to be ready at the drop of a hat.
Exactly.
And what's going to work for people. So you learn audience management, you learn prop management and pocket management and how that all works and what effects work and what don't. And the way to find that out, I'm sad to say, is to do it and it's fail.
Right.
Like any stand-up that you ever talk to or any performer goes, you have to suck first.
Mm-hmm.
So just embrace that right off the bat. When you first do it, it's gonna fail, it's gonna screw up. I've over the years that I've been performing, I've had shows even still today to where it just doesn't go right. Sometimes it just fails. Sometimes you mess up. Sometimes you miss it. Sometimes you flash and someone catches it. Sometimes people change their mind when they're thinking of things.
Right.
There's a lot of different variables, but you learn how to deal with them and minimize that risk. But it's very difficult to do the impossible. But again, original advice, don't get discouraged. Start small. Practice a lot. And I don't mean lock yourself in your room for 8 hours just to learn how to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Practice often, but in a way to where you are still able to do it for people.
Right.
Because ultimately, mastering a technique, that comes in time. It's exactly like playing an instrument. You can learn how to play the guitar and you can get all the notes in the right order, but that's not necessarily a song.
Right.
There's a certain human element to it that makes this how you play those notes and the cadence to them and how, like, bending a note to make it feel like an organic, visceral song.
Right.
I can learn all the notes and get them in the right order. John Mayer can go on stage and bring people to tears.
Exactly.
So again, reiterate, start small, do it for people and have fun. Do it because you love it. Don't do it because you're trying to. Oftentimes people get into magic because they're either, I want to feel smarter than the people around me, or I want to like be really impressive to people. I'll be honest, that was a big influence for me at the beginning. It's very tantalizing, especially when you're young and you're trying to find an identity. I didn't realize this till later in life, but a big part of who I was ingrained in magic because it was this thing I could do. There weren't any other magicians my age. No one around me did magic. It made me unique, which is great and a great propelling point to keep you moving forward, but it can't be the only reason.
Right.
Eventually, the word amateur comes from the word amore, which means love. So when you do something as an amateur, you do it because of just the love of the thing.
Exactly.
Eventually, that love becomes so great that you have to share it with other people. That's when you become a performer.
Exactly. I like that. Now, before we go here, I have two things. First of all, where can people find your magic? Where can they find you if they want to follow you? Please tell.
Oh, yeah, we'll plug. So everything is under Mark Gibson Magic. So my name and what I do, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the social media platforms. Just search at Mark Gibson Magic. YouTube, same thing, Mark Gibson Magic. We'll find you everything. Website, markgibsonmagic.com. It's all the same, just my name and what I do. And feel free to drop me a line either on Instagram or on email or whatever you'd like to be, either be for shows or if you just have general questions. So I'm always very open about the art and the craft and the science behind it all. So if you're like, hey, I'm just kind of starting out, what do you think? Or I even have people send me videos going like, what
Awesome.
does this look okay? And more than happy to. I want to see the art of magic elevated and have good magic out there and people really enjoy it. So yeah, feel free to hit me up.
I like that. And then my second question here is, would you be able to demonstrate a trick or two?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I realize we've been talking shop this whole time, but like I should probably actually do something for you.
Yeah, I'd love people to see your magic.
Yeah, here, I'll kind of tilt this over a little bit just so this stays in frame. If I tilt that down, aha, there they are. So I have a studio at my house sitting at the moment, but I have a studio that has all these stuff behind me. Some of the deck of cards in a wine glass because we're fancy like that.
Huh.
Now, obviously, if I were to spread out a deck of cards and go, here, pick a card, that's not going to work very well because it's virtually. So we're only going to do some of the cards. We'll get the rest of those there. We'll do it with just a bunch, and those will stay in view the whole time. I'm going to flip through these like a flip book, Aaron.
Okay.
I want you to just look in the deck and see a card. Okay, just remember anyone that you see. Maybe not the 8 of hearts because you've been staring at it for 5.5 minutes now. So
sounds good.
Here we go. We'll bring it nice and close to the camera. Let's see here. You see those? Yeah, you can see those.
That's perfect.
All right, here we go. I'll go nice and slow. So just see a card and remember it. Got one?
Yep.
Okay. Don't change your mind. Let me give these a
not.
quick mix. And I'm going to try and find the card you're thinking of. Think about that card, whether it's red or black. Think about whether it's... Okay. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go with this one. Actually, watch. I'm going to go through these cards. Stop me when I get to yours.
Okay. Keep going.
Say hey or stop or whatever when I get to the card that you saw.
I will. Not seeing it.
That's all. Your card vanished from this this bunch here. Eric, what card did you see?
It was the 7 of hearts.
The 7 of hearts.
Yes.
That's impossible.
It is?
Yeah, because that's the 9th card down in that deck.
Huh.
I'll prove it to you. Watch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is the 9th card. You said what? The 7 of
hearts.
7 of hearts.
Get out of here.
7 of hearts. Ta-da.
What?
That is an example of a virtual trick, a virtual card trick.
And that is one deck. That's not, those aren't 2 decks?
Yeah, that's just cards and in a wine glass.
What the heck?
Kind of fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Gibson, everybody, thank you so
Ta-da.
much for joining me here. And I'll talk with you for a minute afterwards. And thanks for watching, guys. And go follow Mark and stay up to do with his magical happenings. Stay cool,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.